I'm out at the northwest corner of our larger 6-acre property today on a nice quiet Sunday, doing some work in pre-flighting beds to grow more crops next year. Specifically, what I'm doing is taking Hugelmounds that have been rough sketched in the landscape and using our electric BCS with a rotary plow to go and dig the edges and get them on top. Let me explain what I'm thinking here. Throughout this whole landscape, I've committed quite a bit to the idea of the Hugelmound or Hugelculture. The idea is basically to take woody material and in an ideal scenario, dig down in the earth on contour, lay the woody material and put soil on top. Now over the years, in clearing out acres of older Scots pine and various trees throughout this landscape in order to open it and move the successional direction more in the direction of food, there's been an immense amount of woody debris to contend with and put somewhere. And so you can see here some old ash logs that are starting to grow turkey tail. There's some old pine logs, but having them exposed really slows down the decomposition process. So I'm leveraging this wonderful tool. This is our little solar powered 48 volt DC rotary plow. It's a BCS rotary plow. I'll set up a tripod in a moment and show how this operates. But what this allows me to do is ride along the edges of these beds. So here's an area I just spent a little bit of time. You can see where I did a few passes. These are very rough sketch Hugelmound. Like here's where I rake leaves. Here's where I throw branches that I'm pruning. Here's where old logs go. And if it just sits there, it will break down into a plantable garden space over time. Here's where I dump some leaf bags with various stuff in there, and there's some old logs. But it takes a long time. I mean, years and years and years. And so by scouring the boundary of the bed, basically robbing a little bit of this, double riding mower width walkway and just making it a single width, I can take that soil and use a shovel to put it on top of the beds. So that machine broke up the soil a little bit, making it really soft and fluffy, and now I can put it on top. The benefit of this is that in the early winter, late fall, having soil on top of these Hugelmounds, on top of these logs, on top of this debris, there's going to be freeze thaw over and over again. There's going to be snow. There's going to be a fairly large amount of precipitation between snow and rain. All that's going to wash the soil, and with the weight of it, start really accelerating the decomposition of the woody material so that in the spring we can be a lot closer, if not fully there, as far as planting in things like corn or squash or planting trees into this potentially. Probably annuals for the first year or two. It's not exactly the easiest work physically, although having a machine break the soil up, super helpful, but I could use a sharp shovel to do that. But doing this work now means all winter, whenever it's above freezing, decomposition's happening. And in the spring it should be pretty fluffy and ready to go. In the spring is when I feel under a lot of time pressure and compression to plant and do things. And so the more of this sort of work, bed creation, that I can do here on December 1st as we get into frozen times. Right now we're below freezing, but it hasn't been cold enough to lock the soil yet. So I can do this work. I can put some hay on top if I want to protect the soil, but it really gets me ahead of the curve in being able to have more developed beds in the spring. Now, of course, it's weedy, but with the winter, the exposure to the cold will hurt some of these roots. It won't kill them all, but in the spring we can shake the soil off, toss them in the walkway and mow and incorporate that into bags and put it back on the beds as shredded nutrient. Seems to be a decent flow for this time of year. It's definitely something to do as far as building beds and prepping yourself for a nice, easier time in the following season. Definitely not done by any stretch, but quite a bit more of a developed bed. And then these troughs right next to the bed are spaces where excess water can be held in the spring and wicked and drawn into the woodiness of the bed to charge it up. I can imagine this being an amazing winter squash bed right here. we've got this area in here which tends to get really wet in the spring, and so I thought what we could do is actually harvest quite a bit of soil from in here. That'll really cap this bed, and we can cap the bed next to it. So some of this is using the BCS to get material that's right next to the bed, and some of this can be about disturbing soil in areas where we can do little water holding features. So we're not going to do, you know, like an excavator's worth of deep digging, but a few passes to kind of scallop this out and make it a little bit more of an intentional water holding feature. So our friend Chelsea here is helping with the digging and the moving, and you can see we've done the 2 passes now around the outside of the space, and this one bed to the west of where we are is getting capped really nicely. By no means is this going to be a weed-free space in the spring, but with good cover cropping in the spring and then thoughtful planting, it should be a really productive bed. And then this area, which had a blown over pine tree that was sitting out for a while, is now getting covered with a bunch of organic matter and mineral, and that'll help really facilitate breakdown. And so in the spring we aren't going to dig in here. We'll take whatever weeds want to pop up in the spring and then pull them out and set it in motion in a different direction. We're chipping away at it. This is about 20 minutes worth of work, and it's definitely a physically real thing to do, but also not too bad for a cold day. And the little pondette is getting a little deeper. We'll see how much further we need to go. We don't have to go that far. Just a little bit makes a space to hold excess water in the spring. And now there's a walkway on one side and the other, and there's soil building up around this area. So it's very coarse Hugelmound, but then on the north was planted with a combination of elderberry and northern pecans, and so now the bed will feel a little bit more curated, I think, by having all that soil on there. Hopefully we have some time today to put hay down, and if not, we'll do that soon enough. Very simple, but a nice upgrade. So a place in the landscape here to receive excess water and falling shovels, and all of the material coming out. We started getting down into the B horizon, the C horizon, like the more subsoil layers that are less fertile. I also don't want to go super deep. We can always dig more later if we wanted, but I don't want to cap the beds in deep subsoil that has lower fertility. But as it stands now, the rough sketch surface Hugelmound that was in position here is now buried. That can break down over winter and be a nice fertile spot to plant in the spring. The trees and shrubs on the north here get additional soil and life to feed them. We have a little spot to capture water in the spring, and a couple beds in proximity got way more cover. So now we're on to this bigger berm over here, which was laid up a number of years ago, and partly is acting as a wind speed bump from our neighbor's open field. So we're going to make that physically more complex and speed bumpy with the soil, and then add in the plant layer next season. So that is it for today. Fairly nice amount of work happened here. The main walkway through here, a little squizzle and squazzle. That'll need to get tidied up with a shovel at some point, but you get the idea. The mowed area was reduced to rob organic matter rich material to cover rough sketch Hugelmounds on both sides. This bed got a good shot in the right direction. It needs a fair bit more. You can see where it's coarse here, but with enough soil in the spring we can get that cleaned up, add some compost and something like a butternut squash or really big broad sprawling things. I imagine castor beans growing in here, sunflowers. Those will all be able to work with the coarseness of this. It doesn't have to be a perfectly fine seed bed in order to be functional, but a lot has been moved in the right direction of more soil on top of woody debris to freeze and thaw for the winter and be ready to do some nice work in the spring. And we got a little water feature out of the deal. Nothing crazy, but a couple hundred gallons worth of excess water holding in the spring as we go through and renovate the soil and do the sowing and the transplanting in, we'll have an easy way to fill watering cans, because this will be full until about May, I suspect, on average. Anyway, that is the update for today on a wintry December 1st with freezing air, and it's going to be moving towards winter vibes overall. It's something to do to get us ready for a much more productive and abundant spring.